A Waukesha County judge has to decide today whether Darrell Brooks is allowed to represent himself in the Waukesha Christmas parade attack trial. That trial is set to start next week. Brooks is charged with driving through the parade, killing 6 people and injuring dozens of others. Now, last week, Brooks' attorney, Jeremy Perry, filed a motion to withdraw from the case. Perry and Anna Keys have been defending Brooks since November of 2021. Yesterday, the Waukesha District Attorney said she does not necessarily object to Brooks' request unless it would delay the trial. Today, the Waukesha County judge said she was not able to make a decision on the request.
He's not demonstrated thus far that he understands enough for me to even get past that to make a determination that he can waive his right to counsel.
If Brooks is found guilty of just one of the intentional homicide charges, he will face a mandatory life sentence. His trial right now is set for next Monday, October 3rd.